This is Into the Story, the podcast where you learn English with true stories from all over the world. Stories that connect us and inspire you to get where you want to go. Hey, it's Bree. I'm really happy that you're here today because I'm so excited to share this story with you. Have you ever noticed that life is full of expectations? There's always something that we think we should do or we shouldn't do, things we expect to be good at, or maybe things that we feel we're just not meant to do. And for many of us, at some point, we ask ourselves, should we or should we not have children?
I woke up in the middle of the night with this sudden, really strong conviction that I'd never have children. It was just like a flash of truth. My body was telling me, you can't do it.
Today, we're going into the story of Sarah Allworthy from London, England, as she faces expectations, both from others and from herself, and what happens when you decide to do something you're not supposed to do. And really quick, before we look at the vocabulary for today's story, if you want more of Into the Story, then you can sign up for my newsletter. Like the show, the newsletter is designed to be interesting, inspiring, and most importantly, improve your English. To sign up for free, visit intothestorypodcast.com. Planning a trip? Whether it's a big adventure or a weekend away, you'll need travel insurance. Last year, my son needed a doctor while we were in Canada. It cost a lot, but my insurance took care of everything without any stress. Plus, they offer the best prices I've seen. Into the Story listeners can get a 5% discount. Just follow the link in the description or visit intothestorypodcast.com/travel. And now it's time to look at 5 words and expressions that Sarah uses in her story today. The first one is to call someone's bluff. B-L-U-F-F. To call someone's bluff is to challenge someone to prove something that they've said or that they've done. For example, she called his bluff when he said he could swim across the river. Or he called her bluff during the poker game. To call someone's bluff. And then we have a whiff. W-H-I-F-F. And this is to very quickly smell something. And it's often a very light smell. For example, I caught a whiff of perfume as she walked by. Or he got a whiff of smoke from the nearby barbecue. A whiff. Then we have blur. B-L-U-R. A blur is something unclear or not easy to see or to remember. For example, the fast-moving car was just a blur, or the events of last night are a blur to me. A blur. Then we have to be daring. So to be daring means to be bold and to be willing to take risks. For example, she was daring enough to try skydiving, or his daring actions impressed everyone at the event. To be daring. And finally, we have a close call. A close call describes a situation where something bad almost happened, but it didn't happen. For example, it was a close call, but the car stopped just in time. Or we had a close call when we almost missed our flight. I'm laughing at that last one because I have had many close calls and almost missed a flight. A close call. And one last thing before we jump in. I want you to listen to how Sarah uses humor. Now, on this podcast, I always teach you vocabulary, but I never really talk about communication, which is so important. She could have told this story in a serious way, but instead, she laughs at herself and the situation. Humor is a really powerful tool in communication, especially with dealing with difficult topics. The amazing thing is that when we laugh when we're speaking a language that's not our native language, it actually gives us time to think. And it's a really powerful way to connect with the person who we're speaking to. So, as always, to get the full learning pack for this episode, you can visit intothestorypodcast.com. Okay, it's my favorite time. Let's get into the story.
Sometimes my husband, Guifre, and I, we will...
Let's rewind a little bit. Sarah grew up in London, roller skating in the street and spending lots of time outdoors.
I went to a girls' school and we wore little blue kilts and we were all very good. And I was a bit of a nerd. I had my little bunch of friends who I'm still friends with today. And it was also very enjoyable. I really liked going to school with just girls, no boys, to mess things up.
Sarah went off to university to study geology, but she didn't like it very much. So she thought maybe she would become a science teacher. But first, she wanted to know if she liked teaching. So she went to Barcelona to teach English. One day, a friend invited her for lunch with some of his friends in the Gothic quarter of Barcelona, a neighborhood with narrow streets, old buildings, and small hidden squares filled with history. And that is the day that she met Guifre.
And he was very tall, very dark, very handsome. And he talked to me about poetry. So I was like, yeah, you're the one I've been looking for.
They decided to travel around South America together and finally arrived back in Barcelona to celebrate her 30th birthday.
And we woke up in the morning and Guifre said, I didn't buy you a present. I'm really sorry. Oh, right. But do you want to get married? I still to this day don't know if he was just like improvising because he hadn't got me a present. I don't know. But I said yes. I called his bluff. I was like, yeah, all right then. A year later, we were married.
They were married in a country house by the sea with a live band playing and a barbecue dinner. Everyone had a great time. And so after all these moments, meeting, marrying, building a life together, we circle back to Sarah and Guifre sitting together, looking at that photo from the hospital.
This was just after the birth of my eldest daughter, who'd been born 3 days before in a hospital in Barcelona. It didn't go at all like I'd expected. There was no drama, no pain. I realized that my waters had broken at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And so obviously I just went back to bed to get a couple of more hours sleep as I knew it was going to be a tiring day. And then I got up, I packed my bag, I ate some breakfast, and I woke up my husband, who jumped straight into action now that his big moment had come. The baby's coming, got to get you to the hospital. And we drove straight off. And yeah, we never really thought we'd get to the point of actually having a baby. I had endometriosis, which made me apparently completely infertile. And we'd spent many years trying for a baby with absolutely no luck. And, you know, there were times when we were more enthusiastic and then some friends would have a baby and we'd think, oof, this really looks like hard work. and we'd go off it for a while and then start trying again. But I remember one night, something very strange happened. I woke up in the middle of the night with this sudden, really, really strong conviction that I'd never have children. It was just like a flash of truth from a higher state of consciousness. I knew. My body was telling me, you can't do it. It's not going to happen. I felt like, in that moment, I felt like someone had died. That was the feeling, like my hope had died. It was like losing something really important. I knew that all my hopes were just empty hopes. And I felt I felt sad for myself, you know? Other people can do it, but I can't. And I know now. But anyway, so because of that, when we finally decided to do in vitro fertilization treatment, we went into it thinking, you know, if it works, that's great, but it probably won't. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. And we'll just spend all our money traveling around the world, and that'll be great too.
And then the thing that wasn't supposed to happen did happen. Sarah became pregnant. One morning in January, they found themselves in the hospital, in the maternity ward, which is the part of the hospital where babies are born, waiting patiently for any sign that their baby was ready to enter the world.
But there was no sign. There were no contractions, no movement, no pain, nothing. I spent ages hooked up to the oxytocin, and occasionally the nurse would come in and check on me and go, nope, nothing, and walk out again. And I thought, damn it, I should have known I wouldn't be good at this, you know? After a few hours, my doctor Magdalena came in with a look on her face like, you know, like the look you give to someone who's failed an exam. And I understood that it was a cesarean for me. And 10 minutes later, there I was in the operating theatre, sniffing a surprising whiff of grilled chicken. It was me. Then all of a sudden, there she was, our little Tanit. It had all been so quick, so easy, so painless. We were stunned. We spent the rest of the day feeling like people had just landed on the moon. We were on the strange new planet of parenthood. We did all the usual things, taking photos, texting family and friends, trying to figure out how to use a nappy. And then a few hours later, at about 10 o'clock in the evening, very suddenly, with no warning, everything went crazy. I suddenly had a terrible, terrible pain. I screamed at Guifre to call the nurses and to take the baby off me. And in like 10 seconds, there were loads of medical staff around me, all looking under the bedsheet. One of the nurses said, "Me cago en Dios," which you could translate as, "Oh, damn it," but literally means, "I poop on God." I'll always remember that. She sounded really pissed off. She was angry with my big, messy hemorrhage.
Sarah was losing a dangerous amount of blood, so they rushed her out of the room and down the hallway towards surgery. As they sped along, the fluorescent lights overhead blurred into a continuous strip of light. They needed to act quickly to save her.
And I went from horrible pain to a state of complete calm and relaxation. That's morphine. And this thought popped into my head of, so this is how I die. I don't have to wonder anymore. There's no more guessing. It's all been decided. Like I'd boarded a train and there was no getting off. I had no power to change anything. It was a very relaxing feeling. And when they wheeled me into the operating theatre, I saw my gynecologist, Magdalena, standing at the foot of my bed. She was normally so nice and friendly, and I attempted to smile at her, but she just stared back at me. She was wearing a green surgical cap, and she had a very serious face. She stood there looking at me while she listened to the other doctors. And I stared back at her with this inappropriate smile stuck on my face, thinking, damn it, Sarah, this is serious. Why are you grinning like an idiot? And that was the last thing I remember before my eyes closed. The next thing I know, I'm in a dark place. You remember the video game Tetris? Well, it's like a huge game of Tetris. There's lots of big, monotonous, cubic shapes coming towards me. I have to move around them and put them into the right place. I've been here a long time working on these cubes, and I know that this is the land of death. It's very repetitive and it's very dull. I've always hated video games. Then, while I'm maneuvering my blocks, I slowly become aware that the darkness is receding to a point behind my eyelids, and I'm being pushed along a white corridor. And this is really confusing. And I hear this crazy voice coming out my mouth asking, am I dead? Am I dead? And my head starts shaking itself from side to side, madly, like the girl from The Exorcist. And my mouth starts shouting out, water, water, water. And I'm aware that this is very freakish behavior, but I just can't stop. I can see myself. I can judge my behavior as totally weird, but I have no control over what I'm saying or doing. And this, basically, is what a bad ketamine trip looks like.
The doctors had used ketamine to put her to sleep during the surgery for what felt like hours, the length of the very long operation. Sarah had fallen into a dark, strange place, like a deep tunnel into another world.
And it was very, very disturbing. But I don't really remember too much about waking up. Apparently I was rambling, laughing, saying crazy stuff for hours to my husband. And then the next few days in the intensive care unit, they were all a bit of a blur. I feel kind of sad about not remembering the first few days of my daughter's life. One of the few things I do remember was one of the surgeons who operated on me coming to give me and Guifre the talk. He wanted us to understand that they'd had to work very hard to stop the hemorrhage. And if we wanted to have more children, we should think about it very, very carefully. And then he stared at us for a few seconds, just to get the message across. And then there were the nurses. When they let me back onto the maternity ward, they all took their turn to come in and say, well, you gave us a fright, or we had a fun night thanks to you, didn't we? And I kind of felt like I was being told off, like I'd been a naughty patient. And I had this vague feeling that, in fact, it was all my fault for doing something that I wasn't supposed to do. Having a baby when my body just wasn't made for it. I'd been too daring, and this is what had happened. I'd created a whole lot of worry and bother for everyone. But after that blessed first meal of grey, greasy soup, I was back with my baby, and I was filled with this wonderful, euphoric feeling. I felt really strong. I thought, yeah, that was tough, but I did it. And look at me, I'm fine. I've got my energy back, I got my strength back. I'd had a close call, but I was okay. I was one of the lucky ones. A few months later, when I went to see Magdalena, my gynecologist, I told her about what the surgeon had said in the hospital, that basically I'd be crazy to try and have another baby. And I asked her if we'd ever be able to use the other embryos that were waiting for us on ice. And she said, yeah, we can do this. We can do this, you'll be fine. And then I told my husband, and I told my parents, and they were shocked. You're not serious? Another one? After what happened? And at the end of the day, they all said it was my decision, but no one was very happy about it. And my doctor had told me everything will be fine. But then when it got to the point of like, okay, there are a couple of months left before the birth, how are we going to do this? And I said, so the risks, what are the risks? And she was like, well, your uterus could rupture and then you could both die. All right, okay, so
She, of course, was frightened. But following Magdalena's advice, they decided to have a planned cesarean, a C-section. And so, on a sunny morning in late July, Sarah and Gifre went to the hospital, and their second daughter, Lila, was born.
And I realized that this feeling of having done something wrong, of trying to have babies when I wasn't supposed to, it was actually just some crazy idea that I'd made up myself. It had nothing to do with reality. And it's given me a new kind of confidence. I kind of feel like I can do anything now. And in a way, the whole experience was really good preparation for bringing up two energetic, intense, emotional, and wonderful little girls.
There are so many stories that come from us doing things that we're not supposed to do. Now, of course, there are certain things that we have to do. They're part of our obligations. But I have never heard a great story beginning with, I did what I was supposed to do, and no. The truly amazing moments can come from the times when we break the rules and we step outside what's expected. So try it. Think of a time when you went against expectations, when you took a chance. How did things turn out? Those are the stories worth telling. Sarah Allworthy is a London-born translator and interpreter who moved to Catalonia, Spain 20 years ago. You can connect with her on LinkedIn at Sarah Allworthy, and I'll also leave you a link in the show notes. If you are enjoying Into the Story, then please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. Every review helps, and I really appreciate your love and support. And of course, make sure to click the follow button so that you never miss a new episode of the show. Okay, that's all for today, folks. Until next time, I hope that you have a good time, or at least a good story to tell.